For the first 6 years of my school career, I went to a Catholic school. It involved mass once a week, religious studies classes, and a requirement to go to church on Sundays. Even at that age, I felt church was strange. It didn't quite make sense as to what was going on. Maybe because my mother is a non-practicing Catholic and my father an atheist, I found my belief in God beginning to wane just after I left Catholic school. Until I was about 12, I went to church with my mother while my father would half laugh at us and go get coffee every Sunday. A few years after my first communion, my mother allowed me to make the decision of whether I wanted to go to church, so I never went again. My faith was always shaky. I found it hard to believe that there was a God who had created everything we know, and while there is certainly moral relevance to the stories in the Bible, there is no proof that God is real. This was often met with what I now know as the divine watchmaker argument, which argues that something as complex as a human eye is similar to a complex machine like a watch, and that a watchmaker can make the watch tick just like a divine watchmaker has made humans tick. Having had more education, the obvious issue with this argument is evolution, but at the same time it was hard to argue. Yet I still didn't truly believe. Even at the time I was given this explanation for why God was real, I struggled to really believe it. I never really had a crisis of faith, I just never really believed to begin with. However, this lack of belief has not stopped me from questioning whether there really is a God. I found that college was my best opportunity to investigate this as, due to the lack of scientific evidence, the only possible proofs are philosophical. I took classes, I read books, and yet I still could not find a proof of God's existence. Possibly the closest to a proof was the ontological argument, which argued that based on the definition of the word God as the most perfect being imaginable, that God had to exist. A perfect being could not be perfect if it did not exist. However, the issue with this argument is that existence cannot be a property of an object. The properties of an object presuppose that the object exists, and as such, the definition of God as a perfect being presupposes that God exists without actually providing a proof of it. However, the largest issue with any theory of God's existence is the evil found in the world. If God is defined as the all-powerful, all-knowledgeable, benevolent being, then why must there be so much cruelty and suffering in the world? There are certain ways around this problem of evil, but none of them truly explains the need for evil in the world. One way around the problem of evil is the view that in order for people to show their moral goodness, there must be some suffering with which to help. However, there is far too much evil than is necessary if proving moral goodness was the only purpose of it. But even if you believe that the purpose of evil is to create heroes, it is not obvious that a world with less evil and less heroes would be worse than the world currently. A second way to get around the problem of evil is the artistic interpretation. Just as an artist must use a wide range of colors in order to create a good work of art, God has used a range of colors to create a beautiful and harmonious world. From God's view, there is needed some type of darkness in the picture to highlight the brightness of the image. However, this view would only make sense from the perspective of God himself, as humans cannot see the beauty that evil creates in the world. Further, a God who allows for evil on this scale in the pursuit of harmony would not be the all-powerful, all-knowledgeable, benevolent being, but rather closer to a psychopath. Probably the strongest counter to the problem of evil is the idea of free will. God created humans with free will, and as such there is a possibility for humans to do evil. However, God did not have to allow for evil to be a concept when he created free will. A world with free will and no evil is something that can certainly exist, but even if God did create free will for humans, there would still remain the question of natural evils, aka natural disasters. In Catholic school, I was taught that Adam and Eve committed the original sin and were cast from the Garden of Eden, releasing all of the world's evils, which would account for natural evils as well, which I now know as the fall doctrine. The problem of evil was a large reason why I found it so hard to believe in God, even from a relatively young age. I could see no justifiable reason why God would allow people to suffer if he is as great as people believe. The fall doctrine is the strongest defense of evil, yet it presupposes the truth of the Bible's stories about creation, which in turn presupposes an existence of God, which cannot be defended. Through all my experience, I have questioned whether God exists, especially when it comes to the existence of an afterlife. Every human has some kind of fear of death, and the idea of an afterlife helps a lot of people through their fear, including me to some degree. However, if God doesn't exist and I still believe in an afterlife, it won't matter that there isn't one, because I'll be dead anyways. This is what's known as Pascal's wager, and while not a proof that God exists, it certainly outlines the reasons why it is better to believe in God. This is the closest I've come to truly believing in God. As far as I have found, there is no way to prove God's existence, and while that doesn't mean he's not real, it does mean his existence is unlikely at best. Perhaps the one thing religion does truly have going for it is the idea that God is not a being, but rather an overarching concept of morals and values which are espoused in religion. This idea is much more concrete and is the reason why I don't believe religion is a total farce. There is a degree of good in what the church does, regardless of the existence of God or an afterlife. So, will I get into heaven? I don't know. I don't know if heaven even exists. But I do know that I do not believe in God.